Since Endgame has been out for a month now, that gave me plenty of time to sink in my overall thoughts about the movie, and the best part was that I watched the movie twice. Once on near release date with family, and once more later on with some friends. In contrast to Infinity War, which is more fast-paced and bombastic with several action sequences moving the story along, Endgame opts for a more somber approach initially to get us reacquainted with the survivors from Infinity War, and a new status quo that resulted from Thanos snapping away half of the population, and all the major action is backloaded to the final act of the movie. This leaves us with a lot of scenes of the characters just interacting with each other, and we get a glimpse into their daily lives. Of course, that doesn't mean we don't get a lot of fan service. I remember calling Infinity War the ultimate fan service movie, but Endgame is a movie that is literally a victory lap, as it spends its middle section calling back to previous movies with the time travel plot, and includes a whole bunch of cameos and references to even minor characters that have long since been away, quote-unquote, from the MCU. It's pretty much fan service dialed up to 11. It's a movie that clearly rewards the viewer that is fully invested in the MCU, and makes no goddamn sense otherwise. When a movie that people don't like much in Thor: Dark World gets some significance instead of being the throwaway movie it previously was, then that's how you know Endgame really is an exercise in self-indulgence. Whereas Infinity War was Thanos' movie, Endgame focuses on the Avengers themselves, and it's no surprise the original six were left alive at the end of Infinity War. Plus, we get some additions to the team like Rocket, Nebula, War Machine, and Ant-Man. Captain Marvel wasn't in it as much as the promotions implied she'd be, and she's largely a Superman Deus Ex Machina, and spends most of her time well away from Earth. I don't think the Captain Marvel movie or Endgame changed my indifference perception to her, so maybe third time's a charm. But I definitely enjoyed the additions to the current Avengers lineup, on top of appreciating the characters having several scenes where they're just spending time with each other. Age of Ultron isn't on top of most people's lists when it comes to Marvel movies, but one of the highlights of the movie that people will be certain to cite is the party scene. No action, just the characters having fun and talking to each other like friends and family. Endgame has a party scene except in slice of life format, and on a second viewing I greatly preferred spending time with the characters or the action, which I still enjoy of course, because the knowledge that this will be the last we'd see these characters together is bittersweet. Nebula was a big surprise. Gamora got a lot of screen time in Infinity War, and factored into Thanos' story, and it slipped over in this movie to Nebula. The time travel aspect brings two Nebulas into the fold in fact, and Nebula subtly plays a role in Thanos' defeat, even if it's not the same way she did in the original comics. Nebula isn't a favorite character of mine, but I thought the way they used her here in Endgame was both surprising and effective. War Machine and Ant-Man's inclusion to the team helped showcase certain missed opportunities in the MCU, namely that War Machine was there from the start and could have been more involved in the Avengers movies, and Ant-Man could have been a founder along with Wasp for the true original six if they didn't drag their feet with the Ant-Man movie, as Ant-Man and Wasp were founders in the comics instead of Hawkeye and Black Widow. Just seeing the everyman Scott bouncing off of the larger-than-life Avengers was great, and a prime example of the slice-of-life party scene that I mentioned earlier. It's another reason why the second viewing was enjoyable just for the character scenes alone. And just the fact that the Avengers take a talking raccoon as something utterly mundane is icing on the cake, with Black Widow in particular having a line about accepting emails from Rocket like that's a normal everyday circumstance. I haven't talked about Thanos yet, but the one from Infinity War is only in Endgame for a bit in the beginning where he gets unceremoniously killed off without much resistance. The Thanos in this movie is one that ended up time traveling to the present as a result of the time traveling going astray with President Nebula getting captured, and is still loyal to Thanos Nebula from 2014 replacing her, helping 2014 Thanos to get to the present. Because 2014 Thanos did not undergo the same journey that Infinity War Thanos did, he's largely a more straightforward villain and remains the homicidal maniac that the pre-Infinity War Thanos appearances suggested. Whether that's a good or bad thing is largely subjective. Some people think that the attempts to make Thanos more sympathetic, or at least understandable in Infinity War, did not really help at all, and that this particular Thanos in Endgame is seen as a course correction, while others lament that the loss of that makes Thanos a more generic villain. Fortunately for me, Thanos in this movie still keeps his same larger-than-life screen presence and remains a credible threat, even without the Infinity Gauntlet. And he still gets some pretty nice lines. One of my favorite scenes in Endgame was the Trinity of Cap, Iron Man, and Thor walking up to confront him after Thanos devastates the Avengers headquarters, and the Trinity are suitably tense as Thanos is talking to them. Ever since I saw that scene from the special look trailer, I was eagerly looking forward to that scene in the movie and was not disappointed. I don't think his more straightforward villainy in Endgame ruined the Thanos from Infinity War. Sure, it would have been great to have the more personal vendetta directed against a in-condition Infinity War Thanos, logically speaking, but he is content with doing exactly the things he said he would do, and going back on his word to fight the people who are out for his blood would retroactively ruin Infinity War Thanos. If anything hurts Endgame Thanos, it's that the Avengers are effectively without a villain for much of the movie, and so their fight against Endgame Thanos is out of circumstance rather than because he is a looming threat like Infinity War Thanos. From Infinity War and Endgame together, Thanos overall is a great villain, but I definitely preferred the Infinity War Thanos, although it helps that Infinity War was Thanos' movie. Endgame focusing on the original Avengers and their remaining allies could only mean lopsided screen time for Thanos, whether it be Infinity War or 2014 Thanos anyway. My favorite characters from the MCU are Tony and Steve, and this movie is a wonderful send-off for both of them. Time-traveling shenanigans aside, I think that Steve got a pretty beautiful ending. Both Tony and Steve have always been getting the most screen time in any Avengers movie, with the exception of Infinity War, where Steve doesn't really do a whole lot. Endgame once again gives them major screen prominence, with Steve's role really making up for his smaller one in Infinity War. He gets two of the biggest fanservice moments in his movie, and his role as the leader has never felt any better in any non-cameo appearance in the movies until now. In Avengers 1 and 2, it always felt to me that he was the leader just because that's his role in the comics. And in Infinity War, it's obvious that his minimal screen time meant he wouldn't be doing much leading anyway. But in Endgame, I truly believe that Steve's leader role isn't just because, and that he is the damn leader of the Avengers. No ifs, ands, or buts about it. Anytime Tony and Steve interacted with each other, it made me giddy. And both of them going back to the 70s and communicating with each other using nothing more than body language and trust really helps cement their interactions and relationship with each other as the one throughout the whole MCU as one of its greatest things ever. And losing both of them after Endgame really bites, because while the MCU will carry on, there will never be another Tony and Steve like Robbie Downey Jr. and Chris Evans ever again. There isn't much I dislike other than the whole villainy aspect with Endgame Thanos, and the 5-year time skip really kind of being over the top in terms of what it means for the status quo. Nevertheless, Endgame as a follow-up to Infinity War is a strong one, a worthy send-off for some characters despite not fully being a conclusion, with some bold narrative and character choices that may have some disagreeable elements, and a great stopping point for the MCU if you're not interested in staying on at this point. It's an 8.5 out of 10 versus Infinity War's 9 out of 10. Infinity War being stronger by virtue of being a movie from the villain's point of view and being much tighter, narratively speaking, while Endgame is stronger in terms of character interactions and emotional elements, at least for the core Avengers. That's the gameplay and commentary. Hope you enjoy this, and Insanity is out.
Adios, amigo. Rest in peace.